The air in the emergency room of St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital did not smell like antiseptic. It smelled like panic, metallic and sharp, cutting through the sterile scent of bleach and floor wax. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of shift that nurses dread not because it is busy, but because it is deceptively quiet until it is. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low, irritating buzz that seemed to vibrate in the teeth of everyone on duty. In the center of the chaos, standing perfectly still amidst the swirling gowns and rushing stretchers, was Elena Vance. She was 34 years old, though the exhaustion etched into the corners of her eyes made her look older. Her scrubs were a faded navy blue, slightly too large for her frame, hanging loosely off her shoulders as if she were trying to disappear inside them. She held a clipboard against her chest, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the triage board. To the casual observer, she was invisible, a piece of furniture, a background character in the high-stakes drama of life and death playing out around her. But Elena saw everything. She saw the subtle tremor in the hands of the junior resident, Dr. Marcus Thorne, as he fumbled with an IV line. She saw the slight pallor of the patient in Bay 4, a man complaining of indigestion who was actually sliding into cardiogenic shock. She saw the clock ticking toward the change of shift, and she saw the storm gathering on the horizon, both outside in the rain-lashed streets of Seattle, and inside the fragile ego of the man currently shouting at a nurse's station. Dr. Thorne was young, brilliant in the academic sense, and utterly devoid of the humility that medicine demands. He wore his confidence like a tailored suit, expensive and ill-fitting for the messy reality of human suffering. He had been at St. Jude's for only 6 months, yet he had already managed to alienate half the nursing staff and charm the hospital administration with his pedigree and his promise of efficiency. He viewed nurses not as colleagues, but as obstacles to be managed, or worse, as servants to be commanded. And Elena, with her quiet demeanor and her refusal to engage in the social climbing that dominated the break room, was his favorite target. He called her Ghost behind her back, a nickname that stuck because she moved silently and seemed to have no presence of her own. He mocked her outdated techniques, her reluctance to use the new, flashy digital charting system he loved so much, and her habit of double-checking every order, no matter how trivial. To Thorne, these were signs of incompetence, of a mind unable to keep up with the modern pace of emergency medicine. He didn't know that Elena's silence was not emptiness. It was containment. It was the lid on a pot that had boiled over once, long ago, in a place far removed from the polished halls of a Seattle hospital. He didn't know that the woman he dismissed as a relic was holding back a tide of experience that could drown him. The doors to the ER burst open, slamming against the walls with a violence that made several heads turn. Rain swept in along with a group of paramedics pushing a stretcher. On it lay a man unconscious, his face obscured by an oxygen mask, his chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged gasps. Blood soaked through the bandages on his left leg, dark and ominous against the white sheets. Male approximately 45, found unresponsive in a parked car near the docks, the lead paramedic shouted, his voice strained. No ID, pulse is thready, BP 80/50, we lost him twice on the way here, GCS is 6. The team swarmed, a well-oiled machine of controlled chaos. Thorne stepped forward, snapping on gloves, his face set in a mask of professional intensity. Get him to Trauma 1, he ordered, his voice cutting through the noise. I want labs, type and cross, and a CT scan of the head and abdomen, now. He looked around for someone to delegate the initial assessment to, his eyes landing on Elena, who had moved to the side of the stretcher, her hands already checking the patient's pupils. Vance, he barked. Stop staring and get out of the way. Let the doctors work. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look up. Her fingers were pressed against the patient's carotid artery, feeling the weak, erratic pulse. She noticed something the others missed. A small, faded tattoo on the inside of the patient's wrist, partially covered by the IV tape. It wasn't a gang symbol or a decorative piece. It was a specific insignia, a trident crossed with an anchor, surrounded by a circle of stars, and next to it a series of numbers that looked like coordinates. Her breath hitched just for a second. She knew that mark. She had seen it before in a different context, under different lights, in a world where mistakes meant death, not lawsuits. She looked at the patient's face again, really looked at it, past the blood and the swelling. The structure of the jaw, the scar above the left eyebrow, the way his hands were curled, not in relaxation, but in a defensive posture even in unconsciousness. A cold knot formed in her stomach. This wasn't just a homeless veteran or a drunk driver. This was someone who had been trained to survive things that would break ordinary men, and he was dying. Dr. Thorne, Alina said, her voice low but steady. He's not bleeding out from the leg wound. The bleeding is controlled. Look at his neck veins. They're distended. He's in tamponade. Thorne stopped, turning to glare at her. Tamponade? Don't be ridiculous, Vance. There's no history of chest trauma. The paramedics said he was found in a car, probably internal bleeding from a crash we don't know about. Stick to your vitals and let me diagnose. Alina didn't move. His heart sounds are muffled. I can hear it, and his blood pressure is dropping despite the fluids. If you send him to CT, he'll code in the elevator. He needs a pericardiocentesis. Now. The surrounding nurses froze. The air in the room grew thick with tension. Thorne's face flushed red, a mix of anger and embarrassment at being challenged in front of his team. You are overstepping, he hissed, leaning in close so only she could hear. You are a nurse. You do not diagnose. You do not suggest procedures. You follow orders. If you interfere with my patient care again, I will have you written up for insubordination. Do you understand? Alina held his gaze. For a moment the mask slipped and something ancient and dangerous flickered in her eyes. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the familiar, submissive neutrality. Understood, doctor, she said softly. She stepped back, lowering her head, retreating into the shadows of the room. But she didn't leave. She watched. She watched as Thorne ignored her warning as he ordered the CT scan as the team wheeled the stretcher away. She watched the monitor as the patient's heart rate climbed, erratic and desperate. She watched the seconds tick by, each one a hammer blow to her conscience. She knew what was coming. She had seen it before. She had lived it. And she knew that when it happened, the blame would not fall on the arrogant doctor. It would fall on the quiet nurse who had dared to speak. If you are finding this story gripping so far, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring more of these intense, character-driven narratives to your feed. Your support means the world to our team. The culture at St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital was one of appearances. It was a teaching hospital, affiliated with one of the most prestigious medical schools in the Pacific Northwest, and it prided itself on producing leaders in the field. But leadership in this context often meant visibility. It meant publishing papers, giving conferences, and having a strong presence in the administrative offices. Did not mean spending 12 hours on your feet, holding the hand of a dying patient, or noticing the subtle changes in a person's breathing that signaled the end was near. That was the work of the nurses, the unseen backbone of the institution. And among them, Alina Vance was the most unseen of all. She had been at St. Jude's for 3 years, hired after a gap in her resume that no one questioned too deeply. She had provided references from a clinic in rural Montana, vague but sufficient. She kept to herself, ate lunch alone in the break room, and never attended the happy hours or the birthday parties. She was polite, efficient, and utterly forgettable. To Dr. Marcus Thorne, Alina was an anomaly that needed to be corrected. He was a man who believed in hierarchy, in the natural order of things where doctors commanded and nurses obeyed. He was handsome, in a sharp, angular way, with hair that was always perfectly styled and shoes that never seemed to scuff. He drove a luxury sedan and wore a watch that cost more than Alina's annual salary. He spoke with the authority of someone who had never been told no, who had never failed a test, who had never had to fight for respect. He had grown up in a family of doctors, surrounded by people who valued intellect over empathy, status over service. To him, medicine was a puzzle to be solved, a game to be won. Patients were cases, challenges to his diagnostic prowess. Nurses were tools, extensions of his will. And Alina, with her quiet competence and her refusal to be impressed by his title, irritated him. It was a small irritation, like a pebble in a shoe, but it gnawed at him. He wanted to break her, to make her acknowledge his superiority, to force her into the subordinate role he believed she occupied. He started small. He would criticize her charting, finding minor errors that didn't exist. He would question her medication administrations, demanding she repeat checks that had already been done. He would speak over her in rounds, dismissing her observations with a wave of his hand. "Nurse Vance has a vivid imagination," he would say, with a smirk eliciting nervous laughter from the interns. The other nurses sympathized with Alina, but they were afraid to speak up. Thorne had the ear of the department chief, Dr. Sterling, a man who valued productivity and prestige above all else. To complain about Thorne was to risk one's own career. So they watched in silence as he chipped away at Alina's dignity, piece by piece. They saw her shrink further into herself, her shoulders hunching, her voice becoming even quieter. They didn't know that her silence was not defeat. It was strategy. It was the calm before the storm. Alina's past was a closed book, locked tight with chains of memory and regret. Before she came to Seattle, before she was a nurse, she had been someone else. She had been part of a world that didn't exist on any official roster, a world of shadows and silence. She had been a medic, not in the traditional sense, but in a specialized unit that operated in the gray areas of international conflict. She had served alongside men and women who were ghosts, operatives who didn't exist, fighting wars that weren't acknowledged. She had seen things that would haunt anyone, things that had stripped away her innocence and replaced it with a hard, cold clarity. She had learned to read people, to assess threats in seconds, to make life-or-death decisions with limited information. She had learned that sometimes, the loudest person in the room is the weakest, and the quietest is the most dangerous. When she had left that life, she had taken an oath of silence, not just about her service, but about who she was. She had wanted to heal, not harm. She had wanted to be normal. But normalcy was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the arrogance of those who had never faced true darkness. The breadcrumbs of her past were there if anyone had bothered to look. The way she moved, economical and precise, never wasting energy. The way she scanned a room, noting exits and potential threats before settling in. The scars on her arms, hidden under long sleeves, not from accidents but from shrapnel and burns. The way she handled crisis with a terrifying calm that unsettled those around her. But no one looked, no one saw. They saw only the quiet nurse, the easy target, the woman who didn't fight back. And Thorne, in his blindness, pushed harder. He assigned her the most difficult patients, the ones who were combative or confused, knowing she would handle them with patience while he took the credit for their stabilization. He blamed her for delays that were caused by his own indecision. He mocked her in front of patients, undermining her authority, making her job harder. He thought he was breaking her. He didn't realize he was forging her. One afternoon, during a rare lull in the ER, Thorne cornered Alina in the supply closet. He was looking for a specific type of suture, and she was restocking shelves. "You know," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you might actually be useful if you tried. Instead of lurking in the corners like a ghost, why don't you try to engage, try to learn something, or is that too much for you?" Alina didn't look at him. She continued to organize the gauze packets, her movements rhythmic and steady. "I am doing my job, Dr. Thorne," she said quietly. "Your job is to follow my orders," he snapped. "And my orders are to stay out of your way, is that clear?" Alina finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were dark, deep pools that seemed to absorb the light. "Crystal clear, doctor," she said. There was no fear in her voice, no anger, just a flat, neutral statement of fact. Thorne frowned, unsettled by her lack of reaction. He wanted a fight. He wanted tears. He wanted submission. But he got nothing, just a mirror reflecting his own emptiness. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, leaving Alina alone in the silence. She exhaled slowly, closing her eyes for a second. She was tired, not physically, but spiritually. Tired of the pretense, tired of the hiding, tired of the weight of the secret she carried. But she knew she couldn't reveal it, not yet, not unless the stakes were higher than pride, higher than career, higher than life itself. We're diving deeper into the dynamics of this workplace. If you've ever dealt with a difficult boss or a toxic work environment, let us know in the comments below. How did you handle it? Your stories help build our community. The crisis arrived not with a bang, but with a whisper. It started with the patient in Bay 4, the man with the indigestion. Alina had been watching him for an hour, noting the slight clamminess of his skin, the way he kept rubbing his left arm. She had suggested an EKG to the resident on duty, a young woman named Dr. Lee, who was hesitant to bother Thorne. "It's probably just gas," Lee had said, echoing Thorne's earlier dismissal of a similar case. "He's anxious." Alina had insisted, gently but firmly. "Please, Dr. Lee, just a quick EKG for peace of mind." Relu. See Tantley, Lee had ordered it. The results showed significant ST segment elevation, a massive heart attack. Alina had acted immediately, calling a code, starting the protocol, saving the man's life before Thorne even arrived on the scene. When Thorne did arrive, he was furious, not because the patient had almost died, but because Alina had bypassed his authority. "You undermined Dr. Lee," he shouted in the hallway, ignoring the grateful family huddled nearby. "You made her look incompetent." "You made me look bad. This is unacceptable, Vance." Alina stood her ground, her voice calm. "The patient was having an MI, doctor. Every minute counted. I followed ACLS protocols." "You followed your own agenda," Thorne spat. "From now on, you are on probation. One more mistake, one more insubordinate act, and you are fired. Do you hear me? Fired." The threat hung in the air, heavy and final. The other nurses looked away, ashamed and angry. Alina nodded once. "Understood," she said. She walked away, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a cold, hard resolve. She had saved a life, and she had been punished for it. The injustice of it burned in her chest, a hot coal that refused to go out, but she swallowed it, she stored it, she waited. Days that followed were tense. Thorne watched Alina like a hawk looking for any excuse to terminate her. He criticized her tone, her posture, her timing. He made her redo charts that were perfect. He forced her to apologize to patients for errors she hadn't committed. Alina endured it all with a stoicism that bordered on the supernatural. She didn't complain. She didn't cry. She just worked. And she watched. She watched the patterns of the ER, the flow of patients, the weaknesses in the system. She saw how Thorne's arrogance created blind spots, how his need for control slowed down response times, how his disregard for the nursing staff created a culture of fear that inhibited communication. She saw the cracks forming in the foundation of the department, and she knew that sooner or later the whole thing would collapse. Then came the night of the storm. The rain was relentless, pounding against the windows of the ER, drowning out the usual sounds of the city. The ER was full, overflowing with victims of car accidents, slips and falls, and weather-related illnesses. The staff was stretched thin, running on caffeine and adrenaline. Thorne was in his element, directing traffic, barking orders, enjoying the chaos. He felt powerful, in control. He didn't see the fragility of the situation. He didn't see the fatigue in the eyes of his team. He didn't see Alina standing in the corner, watching the door. When the paramedics burst in with the unidentified man, the atmosphere shifted. There was something about the way they moved, the urgency in their voices that signaled this was different. This wasn't just another trauma. This was something else. And when Alina saw the tattoo, the world narrowed down to a single point. She knew who he was, or rather, she knew what he represented. He was a link to her past, a reminder of the life she had left behind. And he was dying. Thorne's dismissal of her warning was not just a professional error. It was a fatal one, and Alina knew that she had to decide. Did she stay silent and let the man die, preserving her cover, or did she speak up, risk her career, and potentially expose her secret? She chose to speak, and she was silenced. Now, as the patient was wheeled toward the CT scanner, Alina stood alone in the trauma bay. The room was empty, the equipment humming softly. She looked at the blood-stained sheets, the discarded gloves, the chaos that had just departed. She felt a profound sense of isolation. She was alone in her knowledge, alone in her fear, alone in her responsibility. She knew that if the patient died, Thorne would blame her. He would say she distracted him, that she confused the team, that her nonsense about tamponade had delayed proper care. He would destroy her, and she would let him, because she had no proof. No one believed her. She was just the quiet nurse, the ghost. But then a thought occurred to her. A small, dangerous thought. She remembered the training, the improvisation, the way they had operated in the field without resources, without support, without recognition. They had relied on instinct, on skill, on each other. And she still had that skill. It hadn't left her. It was dormant, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't need permission to save a life. Maybe she just needed opportunity. She checked her watch. The CT scan would take 20 minutes. If the patient was in tamponade, he wouldn't last 10. She looked at the door, she looked at the supplies, and she made a decision. Before we continue with this high-stakes medical drama, consider subscribing to the channel. We release new stories every week that explore themes of justice, resilience, and human dignity. Join us on this journey. Alina didn't run, He didn't panic. She moved with the deliberate, predatory grace of someone who had hunted in the dark. She slipped out of the trauma bay and into the hallway, keeping to the shadows. She knew the layout of the hospital better than anyone. She knew the shortcuts, the blind spots, the places where the cameras didn't reach. She made her way to the elevator bank, not to go up, but to intercept. She knew that the CT scanner was on the second floor, and that the elevator would have to stop on the first floor to pick up another patient. It was a gamble, but it was the only chance she had. She waited, the elevator dinged, the doors opened. The team inside was focused on the monitors, on the patient, on Thorne's instructions. They didn't see Alina step in. She stood in the back unnoticed, her presence absorbed by the crowd. Thorne was shouting at the radiology tech, demanding priority. Move, move, we're losing time. The patient's monitor was beeping faster, a frantic rhythm that echoed in the confined space. Alina watched the numbers. Blood pressure 70/40. Heart rate 140. Oxygen saturation dropping. He was crashing. Doctor, Alina said, her voice cutting through the noise. Thorne spun around, his eyes wide with rage. What are you doing here? Get out. He's coding, Alina said calmly. Look at the monitor. Thorne looked. The line was flattening. Call a code, he screamed. Start CPR, but Alina shook her head. CPR won't help. His heart is compressed. He needs drainage now. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, sterile kit she had grabbed from the trauma bay. A needle, a syringe, a tube. I can do it, she said. Here, now. Thorne laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. You're going to perform a pericardiocentesis in an elevator? You're insane. Security. He reached for the emergency button, but before he could press it, the patient convulsed. The monitor flatlined. A long, continuous tone filled the elevator. He's gone, Thorne whispered, his face draining of color. No, Elena said. He's not yet. She pushed past Thorne, knocking him aside with a strength that surprised him. She knelt beside the stretcher, her hands moving with blinding speed. She located the landmark, the xiphoid process, the angle of the ribs. She cleaned the site with a swab. She inserted the needle. Thorne stared, paralyzed by shock. He should have stopped her. He should have called security. But he couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He watched as Elena advanced the needle, her eyes focused, her hands steady. He watched as she aspirated, and then he saw it. Dark, bloody fluid filled the syringe, 10 milliliters, 20, 30. The monitor beeped. A single weak beat, then another. The line rose. A rhythm returned, faint but there. The patient gasped a ragged, terrible sound. His eyes fluttered open. Elena withdrew the needle. She taped the catheter in place. She stood up, wiping her hands on a gauze pad. She looked at Thorne. "Take him to surgery," she said. "Tell them it's cardiac tamponade. Tell them you caught it in time." Thorne stared at her, his mouth open, his mind reeling. He had just witnessed a miracle or a crime. He didn't know which. "You," he stammered. "You saved him." Elena didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stepped back into the shadows as the elevator doors opened on the second floor. "Go," she said, "before he dies again." Thorne hesitated, then nodded, signaling the team to move. They rushed the patient out, leaving Elena alone in the elevator. She slumped against the wall, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She had done it. She had saved him, but she had also crossed a line. She had practiced medicine without a license. She had defied a direct order. She had exposed her skills, and Thorne knew. He had seen. The question was, what would he do with that knowledge? Would he thank her, or would he destroy her? Elena knew the answer. Men like Thorne didn't thank people who made them look foolish. They destroyed them. She had to prepare. She had to protect herself. But how? She was just a nurse. He was a doctor, his word against hers, and he had witnesses, the paramedics, the tech, the other nurses. They had all seen her defy him. They had all seen her perform the procedure. They would testify against her. She was trapped. She exited the elevator on the first floor and walked back to the ER. The storm outside was raging, lightning illuminating the sky in brief, stark flashes. Inside, the chaos continued. No one noticed her return. No one saw the tremor in her hands. No one saw the look in her eyes. It was the look of a soldier who had just engaged the enemy and knew the war had just begun. This moment changes everything. If you're on the edge of your seat, share this video with a friend who loves a good underdog story. Let's spread the word about Elena's courage. The aftermath of the elevator incident was swift and brutal. Thorne did not thank Elena. He did not acknowledge her skill. He went straight to Dr. Sterling, the department chief, and filed a formal complaint. He accused Elena of reckless endangerment, of practicing medicine without a license, of insubordination, and of causing emotional distress to the medical team. He painted himself as the hero who had managed a chaotic situation, and Elena as the rogue element who had nearly killed the patient. He omitted the fact that the patient had coded. He omitted the fact that Elena had restarted his heart. He omitted the truth. Dr. Sterling was a man who valued order above all else. He disliked surprises. He disliked drama. And he disliked nurses who thought they were doctors. He reviewed Thorne's complaint, glanced at the witness statements, which were mixed, some supporting Elena, others fearful of Thorne, and made a decision. He called Elena into his office. Elena sat in the chair opposite Sterling's desk, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She looked small in the large, imposing office. Sterling didn't look at her. He shuffled papers, sighing heavily. "Nurse Vance," he said finally, "Dr. Thorne has raised some serious concerns about your conduct. Conduct, that is, irregular, unprofessional, dangerous." Elena remained silent. "You performed an invasive procedure without authorization, in an elevator. Do you have any idea how liable that makes this hospital? How liable it makes you?" Elena looked up. "The patient was in cardiac arrest, Dr. Sterling. Standard CPR was ineffective. The procedure was indicated. It saved his life." Sterling slammed his hand on the desk. "It is not your place to determine indication. It is not your place to perform surgery. You are a nurse. You follow orders." "I followed the Hippocratic Oath," Elena said quietly. "First, do no harm. Letting him die would have been harm," Sterling sneered. "Don't quote philosophy to me. You are suspended, effective immediately, pending an investigation. You are not to set foot in this hospital until further notice. If the investigation finds you guilty of misconduct, you will be terminated, and I will ensure your nursing license is revoked. Do you understand?" Elena stood up. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She simply nodded. Understood, she said. She turned and walked out of the office, leaving Sterling fuming behind her. As she walked through the ER, the staff watched her in silence. Some looked sympathetic, others looked relieved that it wasn't them. Thorne stood by the nurse's station, watching her with a triumphant smirk. He had won, he had broken her, he had removed the irritant. He felt powerful. Alina walked out of the hospital into the rain. She didn't have an umbrella, she didn't care. The cold water soaked through her scrubs, chilling her to the bone, but she felt nothing. She was numb. She had lost her job, she had lost her reputation, she had lost her safety. And for what? For saving a life, for doing the right thing. The injustice of it was overwhelming. It was a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She wanted to scream, she wanted to fight, but she couldn't. She was alone. She walked to her car, a battered old sedan that had seen better days. She sat in the driver's seat, the engine sputtering to life. She didn't go home, she drove. She drove through the rainy streets of Seattle aimlessly, letting the city blur past her window. She thought about her past, about the things she had done, about the people she had lost. She had left that life to find peace, to find redemption, but peace was an illusion. Redemption was a myth. The past always caught up. And now it had dragged her back into the darkness. She pulled over near the docks, the same area where the patient had been found. She looked out at the water, dark and churning. She wondered who he was, why he was there, what connection he had to her. She knew she couldn't stay away. She had to know. She had to find out if he survived, if he woke up, if he remembered, because if he did, he might be the only one who could verify her story, the only one who could save her. But how could she get into the hospital? She was banned. Security would be watching for her. She needed a plan. She needed help. And she knew exactly who to call, a number she hadn't dialed in 5 years, a number that belonged to a ghost. The stakes have never been higher. Alina is alone, suspended, and fighting for her career. What would you do in her situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The call was short. No greetings, no pleasantries, just a voice, rough and familiar, answering on the second ring. "Vance," the voice said, "I heard you were in trouble." Alina smiled, a faint, sad smile. "Jax," she said, "I need a favor." Jax was former Special Forces like her. He had left the service after a mission went wrong, a mission that had cost them both dearly. He now worked as a private security consultant operating in the shadows. Just like they used to, he owed her. They all did. "What kind of favor?" he asked. "Information," Alina said. "About a patient admitted tonight, unidentified male, trauma." There was a pause. "That's privileged information, Alina, hard to get." "I know," she said, "but you can do it. Please, Jax, it's important." Another pause. "I'll see what I can find, but be careful, Alina. If you're digging into this, you're stepping back into the game, and the game doesn't forgive mistakes." "I know," Alina said. "I'm ready." Jax called back an hour later. "His name is Commander Jack Reynolds," he said. "Navy SEAL, retired, but not really retired. He's been working covert ops for the last 2 years. He was on a mission. Something went wrong. He was extracted, but he was injured. He's in stable condition now. Surgery was successful, but he's asking for someone. He's asking for Ghost." Alina's heart skipped a beat. Ghost was her call sign, the one she had used in the unit, the one only a few people knew. "He knows you're there," Jack said. "He knows you saved him, and he's not happy. He wants to see you." Alina hung up. She looked at the hospital in the distance, its lights glowing in the rain. She had to go in. She had to see him. It was the only way. She parked her car and walked toward the service entrance. She knew the codes. She had changed them herself years ago out of habit. She punched in the sequence. The door clicked open. She slipped inside. The hospital was quieter at night. The halls were empty, the lights dimmed. Alina moved through the corridors like a shadow, avoiding the cameras, sticking to the blind spots. She made her way to the ICU, room 304. She stopped outside the door. She could hear the beep of the monitor, the steady rhythm of a heart that had been restarted. She took a deep breath. She opened the door. Commander Jack Reynolds was awake. He was hooked up to machines, his face bruised and swollen, but his eyes were clear, sharp, intelligent. He looked at her, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Ghost," he rasped, "I knew you'd come." Alina closed the door behind her. "Jack," she said, "you're alive." "Thanks to you," he said. "Thorne tried to kill me. You saved me." Alina nodded. "He's trying to fire me. He's lying about what happened." Jack's eyes hardened. "I know, I heard him." "I was conscious, Alina. I heard everything. I saw what he did, and I saw what you did." He struggled to sit up. "I'm going to fix this, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Alina looked at him. She saw the same determination she felt, the same refusal to accept injustice. "Yes," she said. "I trust you," Jack nodded. "Good, because tomorrow the cavalry arrives, and they're not going to be happy." We're approaching the climax of the story. If you're enjoying the twist, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the resolution. The next morning, the atmosphere at St. Jude's was electric. Rumors were flying. Alina Vance had been suspended. Dr. Thorne was boasting about his victory. But there was a tension in the air, a sense that something was coming. No one knew what. No one knew why. At 9:00 a.m., a black SUV pulled up to the emergency entrance. 4 men in suits got out. They didn't look like hospital administrators. They looked like federal agents. They moved with purpose, with authority. They walked into the ER, ignoring the receptionist, heading straight for the administrative offices. Dr. Sterling was in his meeting with Thorne, discussing Alina's termination. They were drafting the letter, smiling, congratulating themselves on removing a problem. The door burst open. The 4 men entered. The leader, a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes, stepped forward. "Dr. Sterling?" he asked. Sterling stood up, startled. "Yes, who are you?" "Special Agent Miller, Department of Defense Inspector General," the man said. "We're here to investigate an incident involving a protected asset. Commander Jack Reynolds." Thorne's face went pale. "Commander Reynolds?" he stammered. "Yes," Agent Miller said. "He was admitted here last night. We have reports of medical malpractice, of negligence, of attempted cover-up. We're here to interview everyone involved, starting with you, Dr. Thorne." Thorne looked at Sterling, panic in his eyes. "This is a mistake," he said. "I saved his life, the nurse." She interfered. "She's the one who's unstable." Agent Miller looked at Thorne. "We've reviewed the security footage, Doctor. We've interviewed the paramedics. We've spoken to Commander Reynolds, and we have a very different version of events." He turned to Sterling. "We need to see Nurse Vance, immediately." Sterling swallowed hard. She's suspended. She's not here." "Find her," Miller said, "or we'll shut this hospital down now." Alina was waiting in the lobby. She had known they would come. She had known Jack would deliver. She stood up as Agent Miller approached. "Nurse Vance?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I'm Alina Vance." Miller nodded. "Commander Reynolds requests your presence. He insists on speaking with you before we proceed. Will you come with us?" Alina looked at Thorne, who was standing in the doorway of Sterling's office, his face a mask of fear. She looked at Sterling, who was sweating profusely. She looked at the nurses, who were watching with wide eyes. "Yes," she said. "I'll come." She walked past Thorne. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She knew he was finished. His arrogance had blinded him. His cruelty had exposed him. And now the truth was coming. The tables have turned. The authorities are here. If you're feeling satisfied by this justice, drop a comment below with your favorite moments so far. Alina entered the ICU room. Jack was sitting up, stronger now. Agent Miller and his team stood by the door. "Alina," Jack said, "thank you for coming." Alina nodded. "Jack, what happens now?" Jack looked at Miller. "Tell them." Miller stepped forward. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice booming, "you are under investigation for gross negligence and obstruction of justice. You ignored a critical diagnosis provided by a qualified medical professional. You endangered the life of a federal asset, and you attempted to cover up your error by blaming the nurse who saved him." Thorne shook his head. "No, that's not true. She's not qualified. She's just a nurse." "She is not just a nurse," Jack said, his voice strong. "She is Lieutenant Commander Alina Vance, U.S. Navy retired, former Special Operations medic. She has saved more lives in combat zones than you have seen in your entire career. She is highly decorated, highly trained, and highly respected, and you treated her like garbage." The room went silent. Sterling's jaw dropped. Thorne's face turned white. The nurses in the hallway gasped. Alina stood still, her secret finally revealed. "Lieutenant Commander," Sterling whispered. "Yes," Miller said. "We verified her service records, her credentials, her commendations. She is a hero, and you," he pointed at Thorne, "are a liability." Thorne stumbled back. I didn't know." "Ignorance is not an excuse," Miller said. "Especially when you were warned explicitly by an expert. You chose arrogance over safety, and now you will face the consequences." 2 agents stepped forward and handcuffed Thorne. He didn't resist. He couldn't. He was broken, stripped of his power, exposed. Sterling looked at Alina. "Alina, I'm sorry." Alina looked at him. "Apologies don't save lives, Dr. Sterling. Action does, and you failed to act." Jack smiled. "She's right, you all failed, but she didn't. She stood alone, and she won." The truth is out. Alina's identity is revealed. If this reveal gave you chills, please share this video. Let's honor her story. The aftermath was swift. Thorne was fired. His medical license was suspended pending a full review. Dr. Sterling was forced to resign. The hospital implemented new protocols for nurse-doctor collaboration, emphasizing respect and communication. Elena was reinstated, not just as a nurse, but as a clinical consultant. Her expertise was recognized. Her voice was heard. But Elena didn't celebrate. She didn't seek fame. She returned to work quiet and humble, but things were different. The nurses looked at her with respect. The doctors listened to her. Thorne's absence was a void, but it was filled with a new culture, a culture of humility, of teamwork, of integrity. Jack visited her before he was discharged. "You did good, Ghost," he said. "You stayed true to yourself." Elena smiled. "I had help." "You always do," Jack said. "Remember that, you're not alone." Elena watched him leave. She looked out the window at the rain. It had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds, a new day, a fresh start. She had been underestimated, mocked, dismissed, but she had prevailed, not through anger, not through revenge, but through competence, through integrity, through the quiet strength that had carried her through the darkest nights. And that was the lesson, that true power doesn't shout, it doesn't boast, it acts, it serves, it saves. As we wrap up this story, reflect on the theme of humility. Have you ever underestimated someone? Let us know in the comments. The days that followed the revelation were a blur of administrative hearings, media inquiries, and internal restructuring. St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital, once a bastion of hierarchical rigidity, found itself under a microscope. The Department of Defense investigation wasn't just about Jack Reynolds. It was an audit of the hospital's culture. Agent Miller and his team interviewed dozens of staff members, uncovering a pattern of behavior that went far beyond Dr. Thorne. They found instances where nurses' concerns had been ignored, where junior doctors had been bullied into silence, and where patient safety had been compromised for the sake of ego. The report was damning. It recommended sweeping changes, mandatory training on interdisciplinary respect, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee. For Elena, the attention was overwhelming. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Colleagues who had once ignored her now sought her advice. Administrators who had dismissed her now begged for her input. It was a surreal inversion of her reality. The ghost had become the centerpiece, but Elena resisted the spotlight. She declined interviews. She refused to write a book. She didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to heal. She returned to the ER 2 weeks after the incident. The atmosphere was different. The air was lighter. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed less oppressive. When she walked in, the staff didn't look away. They nodded. They smiled. Some even applauded. Elena felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She wasn't used to praise. She wasn't used to being seen. Dr. Sterling's replacement was a woman named Dr. Aris Thorne, no relation to Marcus, who had a reputation for collaborative leadership. She met Elena on her first day back. "Nurse Vance," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome back. We have a lot of work to do, and I'd like your help in doing it." Elena shook her hand. "I'm ready, doctor." The changes were gradual but significant. Rounds became inclusive discussions, not monologues. Nurses were encouraged to speak up, and their input was documented. The chain of command was redefined as a circle of care, where every member's perspective was valued. It wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard, but the seed had been planted. The culture was shifting. Elena found herself in a new role. She wasn't just treating patients, she was mentoring young nurses. She taught them not just clinical skills, but the art of observation, the importance of intuition, the courage to speak truth to power. She told them stories not of her classified past, but of the lessons she had learned. She taught them that humility was not weakness, that silence was not emptiness, that respect was earned, not demanded. One evening a few months later, Elena was working a night shift. The ER was quiet. She was charting at the nurse's station when a young intern approached her. He was nervous, shy. "Nurse Vance?" he asked. "Yes. I have a question about a patient in Bay 2. I think he's septic, but the attending says it's just a viral infection. I'm not sure what to do." Elena looked at him. She saw herself in him years ago, afraid, uncertain. "What do your instincts tell you?" she asked. "They tell me he's sick," the intern said. "Very sick." "Then trust them," Elena said. "Go back to the attending, present your evidence, be respectful but be firm. If he still dismisses you, come to me. We'll go together." The intern nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, Nurse Vance." "Don't thank me," Elena said. "Just do your job with integrity." She watched him walk away, a small smile playing on her lips. This was the victory, not the firing of Thorne, not the apology of Sterling, but this, the empowerment of the next generation, the creation of a culture where no one had to be a ghost, where everyone could be seen. This moment of mentorship is the true legacy of Elena's struggle. If you believe in paying it forward, Please like this video to support our mission of sharing inspiring stories. Jack Reynolds recovered fully. He visited Alina one last time before he disappeared back into the shadows. He brought her a small gift, a pin, the same insignia that had been on his wrist, the trident and the anchor. "For your collection," he said, "so you don't forget who you are." Alina pinned it to her scrub top, hidden under her badge. "I won't," she said. "You're a good person, Alina," Jack said. "Don't let this world harden you." "It won't," she promised. He left and Alina returned to work. The pin was a secret just like her past, but it was a reminder that she had survived, that she had fought, that she had won. The story of the quiet nurse became a legend at St. Jude's. New hires heard it during orientation. It was a cautionary tale about arrogance, a testament to competence, a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear navy blue scrubs. Alina didn't seek recognition. She didn't want fame, she just wanted to do her job. And she did it well, with precision, with compassion, with integrity. And in the end, that was enough. We're nearing the end of Alina's journey. If you've been moved by her resilience, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us create more content like this. Months turned into a year. The ER at St. Jude's was transformed. It was no longer a place of fear, but a place of collaboration. Patient outcomes improved. Staff satisfaction soared. The hospital became a model for other institutions, and at the center of it all was Alina Vance. She never spoke publicly about her past. She never revealed the details of her service, but those who knew, knew, and they respected her silence. They understood that some stories are not meant to be told, some burdens are not meant to be shared. One day, a new doctor joined the staff. He was young, arrogant, reminiscent of Thorne. He made a snide comment to a nurse during rounds. Alina overheard it. She didn't say anything, she just looked at him. Her gaze was steady, cold, unyielding. The doctor faltered. He looked away. He apologized. Alina smiled. The cycle was broken. The lesson had been learned. She walked out of the hospital that night into the crisp Seattle air. The stars were visible, bright and clear. She looked up at them, remembering the nights she had spent under different skies in different worlds. She was home, not just in place, but in spirit. She had been underestimated, she had been mocked, but she had stood firm, and in standing firm she had changed everything. This is the final chapter of Alina's story. If you enjoyed this narrative, please watch the next video in our playlist. It features another story of justice and redemption. The moral of the story is simple. Humility is not weakness, integrity is not optional, and competence, when coupled with courage, is unstoppable. Alina Vance taught us that. She taught us that we should never judge a book by its cover, never underestimate the quiet ones, because they may be the ones who save us. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope it inspired you. We hope it reminded you of the power of doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when you're alone. Because you're never truly alone, not if you have integrity, not if you have purpose, not if you have heart. Before you go, please take a moment to comment below. What is the most important lesson you took from Alina's story? We read every comment. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Hit the bell icon. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let's build a community of people who value justice, compassion, and truth. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing in the power of the underdog. This has been a production of the Code Whisperers. We are dedicated to bringing you high-quality, fictional narratives that explore the human condition. Our stories are works of fiction, designed to entertain and inspire. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. We hope you enjoyed. They underestimated her experience until she took over the emergency room. If you like the pacing and the emotional depth of this script, let us know. We strive to improve with every story. Your feedback is invaluable. Remember, in a world that often values noise over substance, be the quiet force. Be the steady hand. Be the one who acts when others hesitate.